Mr. President, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, how often have we had to debate here in this esteemed House about crises, violence, and conflicts? We've had to debate, and it's indeed good news that just before the end of the year, we finally received some positive news. Not only for the people in Syria with the end of this brutal Assad regime, but also because this good news clearly shows us how important it is that we do not allow ourselves to be carried away in our politics from resignation, but also from national interests that limit our perspective on foreign policy. Instead, we should stand up for our values and interests, especially in the most difficult times and moments, and stand by those who are fighting for peace and freedom around the world, because we have also experienced in recent years that our values and interests, namely the safeguarding of peace, freedom, and security in a globalized world, are maximally interconnected. And because we have repeatedly seen how important it is that we make it clear every human life matters and every human life is equally valuable. And that's exactly why it was so right. And I would like to take this opportunity, not just because we are close to Christmas, to say thank you that we have found the strength together in our country over all these years not to be swayed by those who have demanded normalization with the mass murderer Assad, but rather that we have made it clear together. It's also important to take a stand, and that we have learned from this, who have called for a normalization with the mass murderer Assad. But that we have clearly shown together, it's also important to take a stand, that we have learned from this that it was indeed a mistake. With regard to Afghanistan, this is dangerous for Afghans. To let ourselves be driven by national sentiments or even campaign logics, and that this is not only dangerous for the people in Afghanistan, a fatal war, but as we have now had to experience, also for our own security. I want to emphasize this point as well, because on one hand, Syria seems very far away. On the other hand, many people have come to us in recent years, and it's important for me to say this, for years, for decades, there have been people living in our country, including colleagues among us, whose families and friends have become victims of this Assad regime. And that's also why the downfall of this regime is an important and good piece of news for the people here in Germany. And that's exactly why in recent years, especially in those moments where one has asked oneself, how can this actually continue? So close work together with these actors, international but also national, behind the scenes with the Syrian exile opposition, with the Syrian diaspora, with the many international contacts who have made it clear time and again, there will also be a moment of hope again. And exactly at this moment of hope where we don't know whether it is tragic or whether it is bearable. Let's do it now, building up together as the federal government in the different departments together with our international partners. That's why yesterday a delegation from the Foreign Office was on the ground in Damascus, along with the BMZ, to get a sense of the situation after 14 years of brutal civil war, to get a sense of it, what it takes, that people can breathe easy not just for a few weeks and months, but that this hope finally turns into sustainable freedom. Because all too often, and that's why I want to emphasize this here, we've seen that this hope can also burst because outside actors have fallen into activism. However, it is clear that we need a process that is not driven by outside states, but by the Syrians from within. I voted to present an 8-point plan with our closest partners last week, with offers and expectations ranging from the establishment of state institutions to the destruction of chemical weapons, to humanitarian issues, for the reconstruction and also the possibility of return. Now it is essential that we explore together internationally with the different actors involved, how this can come into play. And I want to make it clear how relieved we are that these torture chambers are finally over. We must not forget. We are relieved that these torture chambers are finally over. We must not forget that this civil war had different conflict hotspots. We must not forget, what are ISIS terrorists currently doing in Syria? They have committed atrocities against minorities, particularly against Yazidi women and men, especially those who have been enslaved. And we must not forget on the other side, however, that we were able to be active in some areas, especially with development aid and humanitarian assistance. In the capital, Damascus, however, it is not. That was one of the impressions that the colleagues brought back. How incredible the destruction is, especially in Damascus, where people have been malnourished for years, and that's why we have now made an additional 8 million euros in humanitarian aid available on short notice. Because it's clear reconstruction can only work when people are provided with the essentials. Reconstruction, a political path, can only work when it is built on justice. Germany has already supported accountability in many regions around the world. We are also offering this support now, and this also applies to state building, because it's clear if there is to be a peaceful transfer of power in Syria, and we are currently in agreement with our partners from the region on that, then the rights of all ethnic and the religious communities in the country must be taken into account. This Syrian dialogue process must not be undermined from within or from outside. And it's also clear that international law applies to everyone. You can't say that often enough these days. This also means for Syria's neighbors who assert security interests, because if we want peace in the region, the territorial integrity of Syria must not be called into question. To put it clearly, a long-term occupation of the Golan violates international law. It does not serve the goal of a lasting stabilization of the region that we all, and especially the region, urgently needs. I have already made this clear and will continue to do so in the coming days, that in the areas of the Kurds there are currently 10,000 people on the run or fleeing out of fear of further attacks. Places like Kobane are a symbol of the brave, the fight of the Kurds against the terror rule of ISIS. And we, as the Federal Republic of Germany, are part of the anti-ISIS coalition. The defense minister was just in Iraq. That's why including all groups is also in our own national security interest. I will make that very, very clear during my visit to Turkey on Friday. Because we need to pull together with the different partners here. If we go in different directions, then a path to peace can hardly be taken. And dear colleagues, we're all already with one foot in the Christmas break, but maybe even during the election campaign. However, the world will not do us the favor of taking a 2-month campaign break right now. That's why, even more so, not just gratitude, but the invitation to stand together for this in the next 2 months, that we uphold freedom, peace, and security in this crisis-ridden world, and together not only in the Middle East, but in various conflict regions. Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to everyone. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. As the next speaker, we have Mr. Jürgen Hart from the CDU party. Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I also thank you for the opportunity that we also discuss this totally important topic of Syria in these current times,